all of you have been doing some serious conferencing through this entire day, I would think, right? Conference at the first TEDxSugarLand conference. Let me think. Defined as a gathering of important people who singly can do nothing, but together can decide to do nothing. But that's not the case here at TEDx. This has been a gathering of people who do stuff. Academics who do stuff, dancers who do stuff, musicians who do stuff, astronauts who do stuff, rocket scientists who do stuff, politicians, well, maybe not them. Journalists, bureaucrats, venture capitalists, investors, all of them who do stuff, and most importantly, from my perspective, entrepreneurs who do stuff. Quick show of hands. How many in this audience are entrepreneurs? And how many in this audience would like to be entrepreneurs? And how many in this audience know how to spell entrepreneur? Aha. Funny word, this entrepreneur. We didn't even have it in the English language around 30 years ago. The French coined this word, and even they did it only about 130 years ago, circa 1880 or so. They took it from the verb entreprendre, which literally means to undertake. And as the English language has done over the centuries, we calmly stole it from the French and made it our own word. But enough of the language lessons. I never cease to be captivated and enthralled by the magic of innovation and how it has applied over the ages. And so let's start with innovation. Think about it. It's a very misunderstood word. When the so-called experts talk about innovation, they usually define it as a vague and aspirational definition, something that goes like fresh thinking that creates value. We are asked to believe that the term innovative is synonymous with new or novel, and that's probably because the word itself comes from the Latin word innovatus, which means into new. But at most conferences on innovation, everything is supposedly innovative. After having been to some of them myself, I've come away with the impression that these experts, these so-called experts, qualify things like the Cabbage Patch doll, the pet rock, the hula hoop, Rubik's Cube. Remember them? Any of you old enough to remember them? Well, these experts put them in the same league as Sir Alexander Fleming's discovery of penicillin, Jonas Salk's cure for polio, Cyrus McCormick's invention of the Reaper, Thomas Edison's invention of the light bulb, the Wright brothers' creation of the flying machine, and even Steve Jobs' creation of iPod and iTunes. Well, the failure to acknowledge this basic difference is in and of itself symptomatic of our confused fascination, actually I'd go as far as saying obsession, with this term innovation. An unbiased look at innovation would contend that society views innovation in the same way as biology views mutation. So let me try to define innovation in one sentence. Innovation is the process by which an idea or an invention is transformed or mutated into goods and services that people will pay for. So let me use a little story to illustrate. It's been a long day. You guys ready for a story? Okay, well, there is this church that is in need of a bell ringer. And the priest advertises for the bell ringer, and a man with no hands applies for the job. The priest is rather confused and says to the man, "Can you ring that bell?" And he says, "Let me show you." So he walks up to the top of the bell tower, takes a running start, flying leap, and with his head he hits the bell, producing the most beautiful sound the priest has ever heard. But in the process, he knocks himself out, falls to the ground, and falls down dead. Stunned onlookers come rushing up and ask the priest, "Do you know this man?" He says, "No, I'm not sure, but his face sure rings a bell." Now, people laugh. Okay, it takes some while, right? People laugh at jokes, not at the beginning, but at the end. Why? Because jokes make sense only in hindsight, after you've heard the proverbial punchline. We have no context to start laughing at the start of a joke. But once we've heard the final line, our mind works itself backwards, makes sense, we laugh. Ditto with innovation. There is a famous quote, and I forgot who said it. And you know, they say the older you get, memory is the second thing that goes. And I forgot what the first was. But anyway, back to that famous quote that I almost forgot. Innovation is an abstract concept. And like any abstract concept, it remains abstract till the mind works itself backward to make sense of it. So just as one does with a good joke, this ability to see value in hindsight is the most important skill for an innovator. So what about innovation? The process with which we transform or mutate an idea or an invention into goods and services that people will pay. Well, innovation is not an invention, but it could be. Innovation is not an idea that relies on special cognitive abilities of individuals, but it could be. Innovation is not an epiphany, a brilliant spark, a flash of genius, but it could be. Innovation is not always random or unpredictable, but it could be. And it's not always a new spin on an existing product or service, but it could be, a la Steve Jobs' creation of iTunes. True innovation is what separates all of those newfangled things we talked about, like the Cabbage Patch doll, Rubik's Cube, the hula hoop, and the pet rock, from brilliant innovations such as Alexander Fleming's discovery, penicillin, Salk's cure for polio. It serves as a catalyst to open up new vistas for entrepreneurs. Because without the light bulb to the electric car, without the integrated circuit to the mobile phone, without the internal combustion engine to the flying machine, and without the sonnet to the sonata, our lives would be very different. One thing is certain. It is this innovation that is the fuel, the lifeblood for entrepreneurs. And entrepreneurs innovate. That is as fundamental to our universe as Newton's 3 laws. They create jobs, they create wealth, they energize economies. But not everyone can be or is an entrepreneur. That is my absolute firm belief. Entrepreneurs are endowed with what I call the entrepreneurial gene. But it's really not a gene. It's actually more like a virus. It's random and it's not inherited. It's just sort of spread like peanut butter on toast across the world's population. It's country agnostic, gender agnostic, race agnostic, ethnicity agnostic. And think about it, your own friends, your family. Some are entrepreneurs, most are not. My own family is a great example. I have 2 brilliant brothers, far more brilliant than me. One's a doctor and a researcher curing diabetes. The other's a PhD in artificial intelligence and worked for Siemens for 25 years. They both drive exactly 55 miles per hour on the highway, not 56. Me, I got 2 radar detectors in my car, one for the back, one for the front, just in case, and I made it from the airport just a little while ago in 32 minutes to Clemens High School. Not kidding. So, I needn't have rushed. We were running late, so I could have made it in 33. But why is the level of entrepreneurship so different in different countries, different regions, different cultures? If it is as a result of this evenly distributed random virus that either you have or you don't? Well, the answer lies in the country or culture-specific environment, traditions, and pressures that people are subjected to. These, and also the government agencies and government institutions that exist, these either allow entrepreneurs to flourish and grow, or do everything they can to crush and kill it, because institutions matter. Even if you're a big company or a small company or a startup entrepreneur, institutions matter, and it's government that creates the institutions, the public structures that support innovative endeavors. They actually set the playing field for entrepreneurs. They create the laws that define what business even is, and then they use the police and the courts to enforce these laws. They provide accountability. They provide the infrastructure, that is the soil and fertilizers, that business can either thrive or wither and die. Entrepreneurs and big companies need institutions like GAAP, the IRS, the SEC, which mandate consistent standards of operation, reporting, and financial disclosure, and they take punitive action when people stray. More importantly, entrepreneurs and their investors need to be able to exit. Why would someone risk their entire life, their savings, their money, even the disgrace of failure? In many cultures and many countries, there is great disgrace attached to failure. Why would they do all that if there were no opportunity to exit? Why would angels and venture capitalists gamble their money away? So it's up to government to establish and regulate these non-fraudulent free market opportunities for exits, like IPOs, sales, mergers. And an efficient court system is needed to police and redress wrongdoing. But the real paradox is that while government needs to do everything it can to set up the institutions to allow entrepreneurs and innovation to flourish, once it does that, it needs to get the hell out of the way, which sometimes they have trouble doing. Many countries in the world are saddled with arcane, mind-numbing regulations that make it very difficult to set up, register, and create businesses, operate them, and even get electricity, for instance. Even the most developed of nations screw things up, making it difficult to obtain the necessary permits, protect intellectual property, and get past stupid regulations. The World Bank does an annual survey. They call it the Doing Business Survey. They survey 183 countries. It's very interesting. They rate the countries for all the various factors for doing business, for entrepreneurs particularly, and even for large corporations, including things like permits and IPOs and tax systems. And believe it or not, a developed nation like France ranks 147th out of 183 in the difficulty of registering a business. They rank 29th overall, but that is because their court systems are more efficient and they're less corrupt than most other countries. Less corrupt, I don't say non-corrupt. Even Germany, the best performing country in the EU, has the same problems. 99th in their ability to register property and 97th in the world in the protection of investors. If you take a look at Brazil and India, two success stories, they rank 132nd and 137th. And that's because of all of the problems I mentioned earlier. So these countries are succeeding in spite of themselves and in spite of their corrupt, self-serving governments. The United States, on the other hand, ranks 4th and would rank even higher but for its complex and complicated income tax system for corporations. And on top of that, the United States has, between angel investors and venture capital, a staggering $60 billion a year in play, fueling the entrepreneurial ecosystem. So, want to take a guess which country ranked number 1? Singapore. Singapore was determined to be the most entrepreneur-friendly country in the world. But why then? We all know. But why then is it not the most entrepreneurial country in the world? It's entrepreneur-friendly. The government does everything it can to assist entrepreneurs start businesses, remove impediments, good court system. The reason lies in their culture and traditions. A culture and tradition that does not celebrate failure. It excoriates failure. When a young man graduates from college, parents are forcing him to take a nice, safe job in Singapore Telecom or SAP or Siemens. And starting a new business, well, that's very disgraceful. You did it because you couldn't find a job. So this whole culture of excoriating failure rather than celebrating it creates a very bad situation for young people who would like to be entrepreneurial, those who are endowed with that entrepreneurial virus. So they end up going to large companies, suppressing the urge, and living like caged animals. It takes government to understand and cultures to change for this to change. But let's face it, when the world is in trouble, it's the entrepreneur who comes to the rescue. If you think of the 19th century during the Industrial Revolution, it was entrepreneurs like Edison and Bell and McCormick and Vanderbilt who built businesses that started in the garage. The White brothers actually started in their bicycle workshop. But these businesses today are Fortune 100 Dow component companies and gigantic companies, and they've changed the way we live. These entrepreneurs, legends we make movie about, have influenced the way we even think and live and act and behave. Now, when you look at what happened, once again, when the world was in trouble after World War II and the economies of the globe were in doldrums, entrepreneurs such as Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, Bill Noyes, Fred Smith, Sam Walton, all came together and led another renaissance. These entrepreneurs changed the way we live and changed the way we work. And finally, in this age, right in the early 21st century, entrepreneurs such as Sergey Brin and Larry Page from Google, Jack Dorsey from Twitter, Mark Zuckerberg from Facebook, Reid Hoffman from LinkedIn, there's just a small sample of the entrepreneurs who are changing the way we live, behave, and entertain ourselves, and arguably even helping depose dictators and totalitarian governments. So I would respectfully submit to all the policymakers, politicians, and bureaucrats of the world that instead of trying to solve the problems of the economies of the world today through top-down, cumbersome policies and regulations, what they need to do is unleash the entrepreneur, liberate them from their cages, and let their vision, ideas, dogged determination, and most importantly, their innovative ability to help save the world again. Thank you all.